Have you ever felt like pedophiles don't even deserve to live in the same world as the rest of us? And be honest, when you hear the word pedophile, what's the first image your mind paints? A monster? A twisted mind? Someone beyond saving? But what if I told you that sometimes the real danger doesn't lurk in alleyways or playgrounds? Sometimes it sleeps under the same roof. Sometimes it's the person you'd least expect. We've been trained to believe that evil announces itself, that it wears a mask we can recognize, that it hides in alleyways and basements and places we'd never go. But what if I told you that sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one sleeping next to you? What if the monster doesn't lurk outside your door, but lives inside your home? What if he tucks your daughter into bed at night? What if he kisses your forehead every morning? What if he smiles at the neighbors and waves hello? This is the story of a family who thought they knew everything about each other, and a man who destroyed them from within. If you think you know what betrayal looks like, you're wrong. Because what happened to this family wasn't about affairs or lies or broken promises. It was about something far darker, something deliberate, something unforgivable. And by the time you reach the end of this story, you'll be asking yourself a question that has no easy answer. Are monsters born, or are they made? Before we begin, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. And if this story moves you, if it makes you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let me take you to a quiet city in Idaho, where a family lived what looked like a perfect life, and where everything was about to fall apart. But first, let me show you where this story ends. Picture a hospital room. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The steady beep of a heart monitor. A little girl 8 years old, lying in a bed too big for her tiny body. 4 tubes snake from her arms. Her eyes are closed. Her breathing is shallow. Standing in the doorway, a woman in a wheelchair. Her hands are shaking. Her face is wet with tears she doesn't bother to wipe away. And somewhere in the hallway, a detective is reading a medical report. His jaw tightens. He looks up at a nurse. Are you telling me he knew? This whole time, he knew what he was doing. The nurse doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. To a time before the hospital rooms and police reports. To a time when this family still believed they were safe. Boise, Idaho. If you've never been there, let me paint the picture for you. It's the kind of city where neighbors still wave from their porches. Where kids ride bikes down tree-lined streets. Where everyone knows everyone, or at least thinks they do. In a modest apartment on a quiet street lived a family of 3. There was a mother, a woman whose strength could fill a room even though her body had failed her years ago. Wheelchair-bound since a car accident in her 20s, she had learned to navigate a world that wasn't built for her. She never complained, never felt sorry for herself. She just adapted. Her smile was the kind that made strangers feel like old friends. And despite everything life had thrown at her, the accident, the limitations, the daily struggles most people couldn't imagine, she had built a life she was proud of. A home, a family, a daughter who was her entire world. That daughter was 8 years old, and she was magic. The kind of child who left little notes in unexpected places, scribbled messages that said things like, "You're awesome," and "Have the best day ever." She drew chalk butterflies on the sidewalk after every rainstorm. She named every squirrel in the neighborhood and kept a journal of their adventures. She was sunshine wrapped in pigtails and mismatched socks. And she believed, with the unshakable faith only children possess, that her family was perfect. Then there was the father. He was quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of man who held doors open for strangers and always remembered birthdays. He worked as a senior technician at the local History and Nature Museum, a job that suited his careful, methodical personality. He was patient with his daughter, gentle with his wife, helpful to his neighbors. Everyone in the neighborhood thought he was one of the good ones, the kind of husband they wished they had, the kind of father they hoped their own children would become. But here's what no one knew. Here's what no one could see. Behind those calm eyes, behind that soft voice, something dark was growing, something hungry, something that would eventually consume everything he loved. You see, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. There are those who face their demons, and there are those who become them. This man? He was about to become something no one saw coming. But before we get there, before I tell you what he did, I need to show you where it all started. Because monsters aren't made overnight. They're built, layer by layer, secret by secret. And his secrets? They started in the cold, quiet halls of a museum, where history lived on the walls, and danger lived in the shadows. The Boise History and Nature Museum sits on the edge of downtown, a sprawling building of stone and glass that holds thousands of years of stories within its walls. During the day, it's filled with school children on field trips, elderly couples walking slowly through exhibits, and families pointing at dinosaur bones and old photographs. But at night, the museum transforms. The halls grow quiet, the lights dim, the artifacts cast long shadows on polished floors. And that's when he felt most alive. His job kept him there late most evenings, maintaining exhibits, repairing delicate displays, ensuring that everything was preserved exactly as it should be. He told his wife he loved the work, and he did, but not for the reasons she believed, because the museum held a secret that walked through those halls in tailored suits and expensive cologne, a secret that smiled at him across crowded rooms, a secret that pulled him into darkness and made him want to stay there. His supervisor, a man who had climbed every ladder worth climbing, confident, charismatic, the kind of person who commanded attention without trying, who made you feel like the most important person in the room, until you weren't. He was wealthy in ways that went beyond money. He collected people the way others collected art, admiring them, displaying them, and discarding them when they no longer served his purpose. And for reasons our family man still couldn't fully understand, this powerful figure had chosen him. What started as lingering glances became late-night conversations. Conversations became dinners. Dinners became something else entirely. He told himself it was just an escape, a temporary thing, a secret that would never touch his real life. He was wrong, because secrets have weight, and the longer you carry them, the heavier they become. For months he lived two lives. By day he was the devoted husband, the loving father, the quiet neighbor who helped carry groceries and waved hello. By night he was someone else entirely, someone who stayed late at the museum, who lied about overtime, who checked his phone constantly and deleted messages before his wife could see them. The guilt was there at first, a gnawing in his stomach every time he came home, a heaviness in his chest when his daughter ran to hug him, a shame so thick he could taste it. But guilt is a strange thing. If you ignore it long enough, it doesn't go away. It just changes shape. It becomes resentment. Resentment toward the wife who trusted him. Resentment toward the daughter who adored him. Resentment toward the life he'd chosen. A life that suddenly felt like a cage. And the man at the museum? He fed that resentment. Whispered things that made him feel justified. Made him feel like his family was holding him back. Made him feel like he deserved more. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't feel like manipulation when you're inside it. Feels like freedom. Feels like finally being understood. Feels like love. But it wasn't love. It was control. And he was too deep in it to see the difference. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday. His wife was at physical therapy. His daughter was at school. He was alone in the apartment when his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. A voice he didn't expect. "This is calling from the health clinic. We have your test results. The doctor would like you to come in as soon as possible." His blood went cold, because he knew. Even before the appointment. Even before the confirmation. He knew. The clinic was on the other side of town. He drove there in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The waiting room was empty except for an old man reading a newspaper and a woman bouncing a baby on her knee. Normal people. Living normal lives. Completely unaware that the man sitting 3 chairs away was about to have his world destroyed. They called his name. He followed a nurse down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. The doctor was young, kind-faced, the type who'd chosen medicine because she genuinely wanted to help people. She spoke gently, used words like treatment options and manageable with medication and not a death sentence. But he didn't hear any of it. He only heard 3 words: HIV positive. The room tilted. The doctor's voice became distant, like someone speaking underwater. He nodded at the right moments, took the pamphlet she handed him, shook her hand when she offered it. Then he walked out of that office, down the hallway past the waiting room, and locked himself in the bathroom. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. The tile floor was cold beneath his feet. And in that tiny, sterile room, something inside him broke. He stared at his reflection in the scratched mirror. The same face he'd worn his entire life. But now it belonged to a stranger. A stranger who had destroyed everything. A stranger who would never be clean again. First came the denial. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. There had to be a mistake. Then came the bargaining. Maybe if he prayed hard enough. Maybe if he was good enough. Maybe it would just go away. Then came the anger. White-hot and blinding. Anger at himself. Anger at the world. But mostly, anger at the man who had done this to him. His supervisor. His secret. His escape. The man who had smiled at him across museum halls and whispered promises in the dark. The man who had known. He had known the whole time. And he hadn't said a word. That night he didn't go home. He drove to the museum. Stormed through the halls. Found the office where his supervisor sat behind a mahogany desk, reviewing paperwork as if it were any other evening. The confrontation was ugly. Voices raised. Accusations thrown. Truths finally spoken aloud. And when the dust settled, when the shouting stopped, he realized something that shattered what was left of his sanity. His supervisor didn't care. Didn't apologize. Didn't even flinch. Just shrugged and said the words that would echo in his mind for months to come. You knew the risks. We both did. He drove home in a fog. Parked in the driveway for an hour without moving. Stared at the light glowing from the kitchen window, where his wife was probably making dinner, where his daughter was probably doing homework. A life that had once felt like everything now felt like nothing. Because he couldn't tell them. Couldn't explain. Couldn't face the questions or the tears or the truth. So he made a different choice. A choice that would haunt this family forever. He decided that if he was going down, if his life was already ruined, then they were coming with him. Not out of love. Not out of mercy. Out of rage. And in that moment, sitting in his car in the cold Idaho night, the man his family trusted became something else entirely. He became the monster under their roof. If you're watching this and your heart is already racing, you're not alone. But I need to warn you, what comes next is harder. Much harder. Hit that like button if you're still with me. And comment below, do you think he was always capable of this darkness? Or did something break inside him that night? Because the next chapter reveals exactly how he turned his anger into action, and how his family never saw it coming. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched a horror movie where you wanted to scream at the screen? Where you could see the danger creeping closer, but the characters couldn't? Where every second felt like torture because you knew what was coming, and they didn't? That's what this chapter is going to feel like. Because what this man did next wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was quiet, calculated, and absolutely devastating. If you're watching this with someone you love, hold on to them. Because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everyone you've ever trusted. The night after his diagnosis, he came home late. His wife was already in bed, her wheelchair parked beside the nightstand like always. His daughter was asleep down the hall. Her door cracked open just enough for the hallway light to spill in the way she liked it. He stood in the doorway of his bedroom and watched his wife breathe. Peaceful. Trusting. Completely unaware that the man she married had died in a clinic bathroom that afternoon, and something else had taken his place. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room in the dark, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. And by the time the sun came up, he had made his decision. He wasn't going to tell them. Not about the diagnosis. Not about the affair. Not about anything. But he also wasn't going to protect them. You see, there are sins of action, things we do that cause harm. And there are sins of omission, things we don't do when we should. What this man chose was both. And it started with something so small, so ordinary, that no one would ever suspect. A razor blade. Every morning he shaved at the bathroom sink. Same routine. Same time. Same razor. But now things were different. Now, when he nicked himself, when tiny beads of blood appeared on his jaw, he didn't rinse the blade. He just left it there, on the edge of the sink, right next to his daughter's toothbrush. He watched her reach past it every morning, her tiny fingers inches away from the contaminated metal. And he said nothing, did nothing, felt nothing. Or maybe he did feel something. Maybe he felt satisfaction. Because if he was going to suffer, if his life was already over, then why should they get to stay clean? Why should they get to remain innocent? Why should they get to live the life he no longer could? I need to pause here. Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how could anyone do this? How could a father, a husband, become this? And the answer is complicated. Mental illness? Possibly. Trauma response? Maybe. Pure evil? Some would say yes. But here's what I believe. I believe that hurt people hurt people. And this man was hurting so badly, so deeply, that he wanted the whole world to burn with him. Especially the people closest to the flame. It didn't stop with the razor. Over the next few weeks, his behavior shifted in ways only someone looking closely would notice. He started handling the family's medical supplies carelessly. Bandages he'd used on his own cuts? Tossed in the bathroom trash. Open, visible, accessible. Nail clippers he'd used when his cuticles bled? Left on the coffee table where his daughter did her homework. Cotton balls stained with his blood? Dropped on the floor and forgotten, or so it seemed. His wife noticed. Of course she noticed. "Honey, you left the first aid kit open again," she'd say. "And there's a bandage on the floor. Could you?" "I'll get it later," he'd snap. And his tone, God, his tone. It was different now. Colder. Sharper. Like speaking to his family was a burden he could barely tolerate. She told herself he was stressed. Work problems probably. Everyone goes through rough patches. She had no idea the rough patch was a cliff, and he was dragging them all toward the edge. His daughter noticed the change too. Children always do. They don't have words for it, but they feel it. That shift in energy. That distance that wasn't there before. She started leaving him extra notes. Little drawings with hearts and smiley faces. Messages that said, "I love you, Daddy," and "You're the best," and "Let's have a good day." She left them on his pillow. In his lunchbox. Taped to the bathroom mirror. Her 8-year-old heart was trying to fix something she couldn't understand. And every single time he found one of those notes, every single time he saw her hopeful little face looking up at him, he felt the rage burn hotter. Because she reminded him of what he used to be. Who he used to be. A man who deserved those notes. A man who would have done anything to protect her. That man was gone now. And in his place was someone who looked at his daughter's love letters and thought, "You won't be so innocent for long." 3 weeks after his diagnosis, something happened that should have changed everything. His wife cut herself while making dinner. A small slip of the knife. Nothing serious. Just a nick on her finger that bled more than expected. She called out to him. "Honey, can you grab me a bandage?" He was in the living room. Heard her clearly. Didn't move. "Hello? I'm bleeding here." Slowly, so slowly he stood up. Walked to the bathroom. Grabbed a bandage from the kit. And then he paused. He looked at the bandage in his hand. Looked at the bathroom trash where his own used bandages sat. And for one moment, one single moment, something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Hesitation? The last remnant of the man he used to be, screaming to be heard? We'll never know. Because the moment passed. And he grabbed a bandage from the pile, without checking if it was clean. Without caring if it had touched his blood. Without even looking. He brought it to his wife. Pressed it to her finger himself. And when she smiled up at him and said, "Thank you, baby," he smiled back. The mask was perfect. The monster underneath was growing. If you're still watching this, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now. Just one word. Tell me what you're feeling. Because I know this is hard to hear. I know your stomach is probably in knots. I know you want to reach through the screen and shake this woman, tell her to run, tell her to take her daughter and get out. But that's the thing about real life. It's not a movie. There's no dramatic music to warn you when danger is close. There's no narrator telling you who to trust. There's just life. Ordinary, everyday life. And sometimes the monster is sitting at your dinner table, passing the salt, asking about your day. Let me tell you what happened next. Because this is where everything starts to unravel. This is where the bodies start to break. And this is where an 8-year-old girl's entire future gets stolen, by the man who was supposed to protect her. It started small. So small that she almost didn't notice. A little extra fatigue at the end of the day. A headache that lingered longer than usual. Night sweats that left her sheets damp and her heart racing at 3 a.m. She told herself it was nothing. Stress. The weather changing. Maybe she was fighting off a cold. Her husband noticed too. But not with concern. With something else. Something that looked like watching. Like waiting. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, her body drenched in sweat, and find him standing in the doorway. Just standing there. Silhouette framed by the hallway light. Watching. "Honey? What are you doing?" "Just checking on you," he'd say. "Go back to sleep." And his voice, that soft, gentle voice everyone loved, now made her skin crawl. But she pushed the feeling down. Told herself she was being paranoid. This was her husband. The father of her child. He would never hurt her. Right? Weeks passed. The symptoms got worse. The fatigue became exhaustion, the kind that made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain. The headaches became migraines, blinding, nauseating, relentless. And then came the weight loss. Pounds dropping off her already small frame. Clothes hanging loose. Cheekbones sharpening. Her daughter started to notice. "Mommy, you look different." "Different how, baby?" "Skinnier. And tired." "Are you sick?" "No, sweetheart. Mommy's fine. Just a little worn out." But she wasn't fine. And somewhere deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine, she knew it. She made a doctor's appointment. Blood work was ordered. Results would take a few days. And while she waited, while she wondered, her husband did something that still haunts investigators to this day. He hid her vitamins. The supplements her doctor had prescribed. The iron pills she needed for energy. He took them from the medicine cabinet and buried them in the back of his work bag. When she asked if he'd seen them, he shrugged. "Maybe you finished the bottle?" "I just bought them last week." "I don't know what to tell you." She let it go. Because that's what you do with the people you love. You let things go. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You trust them, even when something whispers that you shouldn't. But here's where this story takes its darkest turn. Because while everyone was focused on the mother, while she was scheduling doctor's appointments and worrying about blood work, no one noticed what was happening to the little girl. The 8-year-old sunshine. The chalk butterfly artist. The note writer. She was getting sick too. At first it looked like childhood stuff. A cold that wouldn't quit. A cough that lingered. Tired eyes and early bedtimes. Her teacher sent a note home. "She seems under the weather lately. Fell asleep during reading time. Maybe keep her home for a few days." So she stayed home. And home was exactly where the danger lived. She watched cartoons on the couch while her father made lunch. He cut his fingers slicing bread, just a small cut, barely anything, and the blood dripped onto the counter. He wiped it with a paper towel. Then used that same paper towel to dry the knife. Then used that same knife to spread peanut butter on her sandwich. And she ate every bite. "Thanks, Daddy." "You're welcome, sweetheart. I need to stop here. Because I know, you want to scream. You want to reach through time and space and knock that sandwich out of her hands. You want to believe this is fiction. That no father could ever, would ever, do something like this. But this is real. This happened. And that little girl, that beautiful, innocent, butterfly-drawing little girl, had no idea that her own father was poisoning her future with every calculated act of negligence. It was a Thursday when the mother collapsed. She was in the kitchen, reaching for a glass from the cabinet, when her vision blurred. The room tilted. Her hand missed the glass, and she went down, hard. Her daughter found her. Screamed so loud the neighbors heard it through the walls. "Mommy, Mommy, wake up." The father came running. And here's what the neighbors reported later, what they told police would haunt them forever. He didn't look panicked. He looked calm. Almost peaceful. Like he'd been expecting this moment. Like he'd been waiting for it. He called 911 with the steady voice of a man ordering takeout. "My wife collapsed. She's unconscious. Yes, she's breathing. Our address is..." The ambulance came. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher. And as they wheeled her out the door, the little girl grabbed her father's hand and looked up at him with terrified eyes. "Daddy? Is Mommy going to be okay?" He looked down at his daughter. His sick, weakening, unknowing daughter. And he said, "Everything's going to be fine." The lie slipped out so easily. Like he'd been practicing it his whole life. The mother woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by machines she couldn't name. Her husband sat beside her, holding her hand. Her daughter was in the waiting room with a neighbor, drawing pictures on the back of old magazines. "What happened?" she asked, her voice cracked and dry. "You fainted. They're running tests." "Tests for what?" He squeezed her hand. "They're just being thorough. Don't worry." But she saw something in his eyes. Something wrong. Something that looked almost like satisfaction? No, she was imagining things. This was her husband. He loved her. He would never. A doctor walked in. Young. Professional. A clipboard in her hands and an expression on her face that made the mother's blood run cold. "We have some results from your blood work," the doctor said carefully. "I think we need to talk privately." The mother looked at her husband. He didn't move. "He can stay," she said. "He's my husband." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. And the next words out of her mouth would change everything. "Ma'am, have you been tested for HIV recently?" The room went silent. The heart monitor beeped. Once, twice, 3 times. And the mother, the wheelchair-bound, soft-spoken, impossibly strong mother, felt her entire world crack down the middle. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "What did you just say?" But before the doctor could answer, before any explanation could be given, a nurse burst through the door. Out of breath, face pale. "Doctor, you need to come quickly." The daughter, the little girl in the waiting room, she just collapsed. "She's not responsive." And in that moment, in that single horrifying moment, the mother understood. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. Something was very, very wrong. She looked at her husband, searched his face for shock, for fear, for anything. But what she saw instead made her stomach turn. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't panicked. He just sat there, quiet, still, like a man watching dominoes fall, exactly as he'd planned. "Oh my God. I told you this was going to be hard. I told you it would stay with you. If you're still here, if you're still watching, you're not just a viewer anymore. You're a witness. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if you discovered the person you trusted most was the one destroying you? Because what comes next, the investigation, the confessions, the truth about this monster's mind, will answer questions you didn't even know you had. Stay with me. We're almost at the end. And trust me, you need to see how this finishes. 2 hospital beds. Same floor. Same hallway. Mother in one room. Daughter in another. And somewhere between them, a man pacing slowly, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. The mother couldn't move. Not because of her wheelchair, she wasn't even in it. She couldn't move because her body had forgotten how. Her daughter. Her baby. Her 8-year-old sunshine was lying in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of her arms, machines beeping warnings, and doctors using words no parent should ever hear. Severe immunodeficiency. Dangerously low T-cell count. We need to run more tests. But the mother already knew. Deep in her bones, in that place where mothers store impossible truths, she already knew. Her daughter had it too. The same thing the doctor had just told her she had. The same death sentence. The same stolen future. HIV. And in that moment, lying in that cold hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, she asked herself a question that would haunt her forever. How did this happen? How did both of them, mother and daughter, end up with the same diagnosis? She hadn't done anything. Hadn't been with anyone. Hadn't used drugs or shared needles or any of the things they warn you about. She had been faithful. Careful. Good. So how? And then, like a knife sliding between her ribs, the answer came. There was only one common denominator. Only one person who connected them both. Only one explanation that made any sense. Him. She demanded to see him. The nurses tried to calm her down. "Ma'am, you need to rest. Your blood pressure. Get him in here. Now." Her voice, that soft, gentle voice that never raised itself, that always found patience even in the hardest moments, had become something else. Something broken. Something dangerous. He walked in like a man entering a business meeting. Calm. Collected. Hands still in his pockets. And when he looked at her, when their eyes met across that sterile hospital room, she saw it. The truth. Written all over his face. He wasn't confused. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't scrambling for answers like an innocent man would be. He already knew. He had known this whole time. "What did you do?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "What are you talking about?" Don't you dare. "What did you do to us?" He blinked. Slow. Unbothered. Like her screaming was an inconvenience. "I didn't do anything." "Then explain it. Explain how I have HIV. Explain how our daughter has HIV. Explain it to me right now or I swear to God." "You're hysterical. I'm dying. Our baby is dying. And you're standing there like..." She couldn't finish. The words choked in her throat, because she saw something cross his face. Just for a second. Just a flicker. A smile. Not a full smile. Not obvious. Just the corner of his mouth, twitching upward, like he was watching something satisfying unfold. And in that moment she knew. She didn't just suspect. She knew. The man she had married, the man she had trusted with her life, with her daughter's life, had done this deliberately. "Get out." "Excuse me?" "Get out. Get out of this room." Get away from me. Get away from my daughter. Get out. She was screaming so loud that security came. Nurses rushed in. Someone called for a sedative. And through it all, through the chaos and the shouting and the hands trying to hold her down, she watched him walk away. Slow. Steady. Like a man who had already won. The hospital reported it. They had to. When a mother and child both test positive for HIV under suspicious circumstances, when the timeline doesn't add up, when something feels deeply, terribly wrong, they have a legal obligation to notify authorities. Detective Rivera was assigned to the case. 23 years on the force. Seen everything. Thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. The medical examiner's report landed on his desk at 9 a.m. By 9:15 he had called an emergency meeting. We have a situation. He laid out the facts. Mother, HIV positive. No history of risk factors. No drug use. No affairs. No blood transfusions. Daughter, HIV positive. 8 years old. No possible exposure through any normal means. Father, refused to be tested. Lawyered up immediately. Hasn't answered a single question. We need to get inside that apartment, Rivera said. Something happened there. And I want to know what. The search warrant came through by noon. What they found inside would make veteran officers physically ill. The apartment looked normal at first glance. Clean enough. Lived in. Family photos on the walls. A child's drawings taped to the refrigerator. Butterflies and rainbows and stick figures holding hands. But the forensics team knew where to look. They started in the bathroom. The razor was still there, sitting on the edge of the sink. When they tested it, they found traces of blood. His blood. And the blade was positioned exactly where a child would reach when grabbing her toothbrush. They moved to the kitchen. Found nail clippers in a drawer, contaminated. Found scissors in a cup by the phone, contaminated. Found a paring knife with microscopic traces of blood in the handle grooves, contaminated. But it was the trash that broke them. Buried under coffee grounds and food scraps, they found bandages. Used bandages. Bloody bandages. Exposed. Accessible. Exposed to everything and everyone in that household. One forensic tech, a woman who had processed dozens of crime scenes, stepped outside and threw up in the bushes. Because this wasn't violence. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was systematic. Calculated. Patient. This was a man who had turned his own home into a weapon, and used it to destroy the people who loved him most. Detective Rivera sat in the interrogation room across from a court-appointed psychologist. I need to understand something, he said. What kind of person does this? What's the profile? The psychologist was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that would end up in every news report, every documentary, every article about this case. Detective, there are people who hurt others because they lose control. And then there are people who hurt others because control is exactly what they want. She paused. What you're describing, this level of deliberate, sustained harm to family members, including a child, it suggests someone with severe personality pathology. Possibly antisocial. Possibly narcissistic. But there's another question we need to consider. What's that? When someone targets a child this way, even without sexual abuse, we have to ask, is there a predatory element? Is there a pattern of behavior that suggests this isn't the first time he's enjoyed having power over someone vulnerable? Rivera felt his stomach turn. Are you saying? I'm saying we need to dig deeper. Much deeper. Because men like this don't become monsters overnight. There's always a history. Always warning signs someone missed. What kind of warning signs? The psychologist leaned forward. The kind that hide in plain sight. Until it's too late. That night, a forensic tech returned to the apartment for a final sweep. She was alone. The place had already been processed, but something was bothering her. The daughter's room. She walked in slowly. Pink walls. Stuffed animals on the bed. A small desk covered in crayons and half-finished drawings. And there, tucked under the pillow, a notebook. The tech pulled it out, opened it, and what she read made her hands shake. It was a journal. The little girl's journal. And the last entry, dated just 3 days before she collapsed, said this. Daddy is different now. He looks at me weird. Not happy weird. Scary weird. I don't think he loves me anymore. I asked Mommy, but she said I'm imagining it. But I'm not imagining it. Something is wrong with Daddy. I can feel it. And I'm scared. The tech closed the notebook, pulled out her phone, and called Detective Rivera with 3 words. You need to see this. She knew. That little girl knew something was wrong. She wrote it down. She tried to tell someone, and nobody listened. If that doesn't break your heart, I don't know what will. We're almost at the end now. 1 chapter left. 1 final chapter that will answer every question, and leave you with one you'll never be able to shake. Hit subscribe. Hit the bell. Because you need to see how this ends. And trust me, you're not ready. They came for him at dawn. 4 police cars. 8 officers. 1 detective who hadn't slept in 36 hours. He was sitting at the kitchen table when they broke down the door. Coffee in hand. Newspaper open. Like it was any other morning. Like he hadn't destroyed 2 lives. Like he wasn't a monster wearing human skin. Stand up. Hands where we can see them. He stood, slowly, set down his coffee cup with a soft clink. And when Detective Rivera stepped forward with the handcuffs, when the metal clicked around his wrists, he did something that made every officer in that room feel sick. He smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a confused smile. A satisfied smile. Like a man who had accomplished exactly what he set out to do. You think you've won something? Rivera asked, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. The man looked at him, tilted his head, and said 5 words that would be quoted in every court document, every news story, every psychological analysis of this case. They'll never forget me now. The interrogation lasted 7 hours. 7 hours of questions. 7 hours of silence. 7 hours of that same empty smile. And then, without warning, he started talking. Not because he felt guilty. Not because he wanted forgiveness. But because he wanted someone to understand. To appreciate what he had done. You want to know why? He said, leaning back in his chair like a man telling a story at a dinner party. I'll tell you why. Rivera didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because I was already dead. The moment I got that diagnosis, I was dead. My life was over. Everything I'd built, gone. Everything I'd worked for, meaningless. He paused. And they got to just keep living. My wife. My daughter. They got to wake up every day and smile and laugh and pretend everything was fine while I rotted from the inside out. His jaw tightened. That wasn't fair. So you decided to infect them, Rivera said, his voice flat. Your wife. Your 8-year-old daughter. I decided we would all face it together. That's not facing it together. That's murder. The man shrugged. Actually shrugged. Like they were discussing the weather. If I'm drowning, he said slowly, they're coming with me. That's what family means. We share everything. The good and the bad. Isn't that what the vows say? In sickness and in health. Rivera wanted to reach across the table and break his jaw. Instead, he asked one final question. Did you ever love them? Even once? Did you ever actually love your wife or your daughter? The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. A cold, hollow sound that echoed off the interrogation room walls. Love. Detective, love is what weak people tell themselves to feel better about being trapped. I was never trapped. I was always in control. Even now, sitting here in handcuffs, I'm in control. Because I decided how this story ends. Not them. Not you. Me. Rivera stood up, walked to the door, and said one final thing before leaving. You're wrong. You don't get to decide how this story ends. They do. Your wife and your daughter. They're the ones who are going to survive this. They're the ones who are going to heal. And 20 years from now, when you're rotting in a cell, they'll be living their lives. Happy. Free. And they won't even remember your name. The man's smile flickered. Just for a second. Just enough. And then Rivera walked out and never looked back. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical records. Forensic analysis. The journal. The contaminated items. His own recorded confession. He was convicted on 2 counts of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, 2 counts of reckless endangerment of a child, and 1 count of attempted murder. The judge called it one of the most disturbing cases of domestic violence she had ever seen. He was sentenced to 47 years. No possibility of parole. He showed no emotion when the verdict was read. No reaction when the sentence was announced. He just sat there, still, silent, like a man who had already checked out of his own life. But this story isn't about him. It never was. This story is about a mother who refused to break, who sat in that courtroom every single day, in her wheelchair holding her daughter's hand, and faced the man who tried to destroy them. This story is about an 8-year-old girl who learned the hardest lesson anyone can learn, that sometimes the monsters aren't under your bed. They're in your family photos. But she survived. They both survived. And survival, real survival, isn't just about living. It's about choosing to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. The mother started a foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting families affected by domestic abuse and intentional HIV transmission. She speaks at conferences now, tells her story, helps other survivors find their voice. And her daughter? She's in high school now, on a roll, captain of the debate team. Still draws butterflies, but now they're in art class and her teacher says she has real talent. She doesn't talk about her father, doesn't think about him, doesn't let him occupy space in her mind, because she learned something important in that hospital room all those years ago. Some people don't deserve to be remembered. And some stories don't end with the villain. They end with the survivors. If you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through every twist and every heartbreak, I need to ask you something. Not about this case. About your life. Do you really know the people closest to you? Do you trust them with your life? With your children's lives? Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like the man who holds the door, the neighbor who waves hello, the husband who kisses you goodnight. This family trusted the wrong person, and they paid a price no one should ever have to pay. But they're still here, still fighting, still healing. And if there's any light in this darkness, any hope at all, it's this. Monsters don't get the final word. Survivors do. If this story moved you, if it made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me your thoughts. And answer this one last question, the question that started this whole journey. Are monsters born? Or are they made? I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe out there. And never stop paying attention to the people in your life. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the danger isn't out there. It's already inside your home.